Good morning. Got a good crowd this morning. Good to see everybody. Now, I'm kind of suffering from a cold this morning, so you all kind of bear with me just a little bit. Got a question for you this morning. How is your endurance? How is your endurance? One of the major conversations that me and Laura seem to have these days is our lack of endurance. Now, what do I mean when I say that? We compare what we can do today to what we could do when we were much younger. Now, what we can do today is not very good. So it makes me wonder what I could do when I was younger if it was very good either, because I think my bar must have been set pretty low. Well, when you think about endurance, I decided to look up and see what a doctor says about endurance, life endurance, and then life's decline. And this is what he says. Natural age-related decline in physical and cognitive abilities, as well as the potential for both physical and mental endurance to be impacted by disease and lifestyle choices, are to be expected and planned for. Now let that his statement when he says natural life occurrences. Of course, he does elaborate on postponing measures that can be taken and that can make these things maybe not be so early in your later years. Things like physical activity, healthy diet, stress management, medical intervention, he says, awareness through regular checkups. And then his final thought was, it is natural that we decline before we die. Now that I've got all the mothers' attention in the group, I want to wish everybody a happy Mother's Day. Now you may be saying, well, why did you just start with that depressing thought? Well, that's going to come back, okay? Yes, Mother's Day is a very happy day. I always enjoy giving a Mother's Day lesson. I don't know that if you all have noticed it throughout the years that I've been preaching, I don't always give a Father's Day lesson, but I always give a Mother's Day lesson. And it's not because I can't find anything good to say about the men, but it is easy to find something good to say about the ladies. So yes, I hope you have a joyful Mother's Day. Here's what I did. And I'm glad Joyce is here this morning because I'm going to talk about your mother. I bet you that there is not a congregation around that knows more about the preacher's mother and has heard more stories about the preacher's mother than this congregation right here. I thoroughly enjoy talking about my mother. So what I did when I started putting this lesson together, I tried to think of one word that would describe my mother. The word I came up with was endurance. She was full of endurance. No matter what came along, she endured it. Very few times throughout my life do I remember her getting sad about things. Very many times I saw her mad about things. But she hardly ever was sad. She endured things so very well. So here's what I want you to do this morning. Not very many times does a preacher give a lesson and tell you to think about something else. I do want you to listen to the lesson, but what I want you to do is while I am giving this lesson is think about your own mother. Okay? Let your own mother come into your thoughts as we go throughout this lesson. What word would you use, one word, to describe your mother? That's not easy to do. And some of you sarcastic people, when you get that one out of your head, pick a good one, okay? But what word would you use to describe your mother? And Would your mother be proud that you picked that word? It's kind of a sobering thought if you try to sum up a person's whole lifetime in one word. Now, I would wager, as you're sitting there, whether you're male or female, as you thought of that one word that would describe your mother, I would wager it would describe you too. Because no earthly person in this world has more influence upon you than your mother. Your mother, in so many, many ways, has made you who you are. Now, this morning I'm going to describe some aspects of my mother. Now, we'll try to have a little fun with this, and I'm only going to do 3. But even though we're going to have some fun with it, it's a very serious topic, and I want you to consider it as we go through it in your own mother. As a mother that's sitting in this room, I also want you to think about yourself. Think about yourself. Measure yourself by the yardstick, by the ruler, by the measurement that we're going to compare to this morning. Not particularly my mother, but women in general. Because really the lesson this morning is not just for mothers. One of the places that we're going to turn to in the Bible describes women. And it goes on then to describe women who turn into mothers. So the lesson is really for everybody, as it always is, but particularly for all women in the congregation this morning. So think of yourself, and as we go through this, think of the awesome responsibility God has given to women, particularly to mothers. God has given the responsibility to mothers to raise His children. Now think about that. I'm going to say that a couple times this morning. God has given the responsibility to mothers to raise His children. Is that an awesome responsibility or not? It wasn't that many weeks ago that we had a lesson that talked about all children are God's children. So you, as a mother, have a responsibility to raise one of God's, or more than one of God's children. That is an awesome responsibility. See if I can keep myself in order this morning. Now, some things that I'm going to describe about my mother that stand out to me, and like I said, there's only 3, there's a bunch. But only 3 things that I'm going to talk about this morning, okay? Now, these 3 things probably won't have anything to do with your mother. But then again, when you search the things closely, it may be very well related to the things that your mother had, to the things that your mother went through. But if it's not, that's why I'm giving you permission this morning to maybe think of something related that is more characteristic to your mother. And then, as I mentioned, characteristic to yourself. Now, when I came up with the word endurance for my mother, you know the first thing I thought of? Her feet. Sounds kind of odd, don't it? Her feet. My mother had very pretty feet. She really did. And I can say that, and I can know that because I painted her toenails many times. I try to get Lynette to let me paint her toenails. I'm painting her fingernails now, but she hasn't given me permission to paint her toenails yet. And I want Lynette to know that when I'm speaking of my mother, even though maybe the stories don't apply, did you realize, and last night laying in bed, when I couldn't go to sleep, I tried to do the math and I couldn't do it. And now when I say this, Laura's going to be trying to do the math, the whole rest of the story, instead of listening to the lesson. But you are almost, I think within a year of being my mother-in-law, longer than my mother was my mother as far as living. It's within the next year. So that's amazing to me, because my mother lived to be 80 years old. But you have been my mother-in-law for right at that number of years, which was around 40 to 41 years. So that's amazing to me. So to me, I will say, for all these years, about 20 years, I have not been without a mother. You are my mother to me. But I'm going to talk about my blood mother this morning. And if God gives me the ability to outlast you, then I'm going to start talking about you. I'll have whole new material. So, the thing that I thought about with my mother was her feet. And as I said, I have looked very closely at her feet. She had very pretty, well-kept feet. You hardly ever saw her feet that her toenails wasn't painted, and I wasn't the only one that ever did it. I'm sure Joyce did it. I'm sure Mom did it herself, but I did take my turn. But you know what? On the other side of the top of her feet was the most calloused foot I believe I've ever seen. Mom could run down a gravel road. And I think, of course, in part was because she went without shoes a lot. And I know she could run down a gravel road because we had a little gravel road that led out to the highway, and she chased me down it without shoes on several occasions. Now, if I had to describe one thing about my mother's feet, one story, I guess, that sticks out to me the most would be my dad was involved, and Mom actually used to mow the yard barefooted. Now, other than the danger of getting your toe under the lawnmower, can you imagine mowing the yard barefooted? And I remember my dad saying, "May, put on some shoes." But that's how comfortable she was with her feet being as tough as they were, and she could mow the yard barefoot. Now, later in life, we switched to a riding mower, and she would mow on a riding mower barefoot a lot of times. And that has always stuck out in my mind. But do you know what the feet symbolize in the Bible? The feet symbolize our path in life. And that is talked about many times in the Bible. Actually, too many times in the realm of our time that we have this morning to even mention. That our feet are the member of our body that facilitates the direction or the path that we walk. And I'm going to say this morning that although my mother did not always have me sitting in church pews on Sunday morning, as many as of you do here, each and every Sunday morning, it is so important to you to strive to do that. It is remarkable. And even though Mom didn't have me in church every Sunday morning, there is no doubt in my mind that the path of my life was very important to her. She always wanted me to be aware. She always taught us all that to follow our feet down the proper path. Now, so here's the deal. Whether your mother was a Christian, according to the Bible's description of a Christian or not, your mother had this responsibility. She had the responsibility of leading you down the proper path. In Proverbs 4 and verse 26, it tells us to give careful thought to the paths of our feet. So if we are to give careful thought to the paths of our feet, then obviously we are to give careful thought to the paths of our children's feet. And that is very important for you to do. You being here this morning, me being here this morning is a great testament. It shows a great attribute to the teaching of our mothers. Joyce is here this morning. Got her daughter and her granddaughter here. I will bestow a lot of that up on Mom. She knew that the paths of her children was important to her, and since that importance was there, it would be important for us and our children. So if you are here this morning, I truly believe you can thank your mother for that. And why is being here important? Well, it's important because nothing on this earth can compare to the value of our soul. Nothing can compare to the value of our soul. We all know the scripture, Matthew 16 and 26, and repeat it almost again, word for word, in Mark 8 and verse 36. For what will it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? I was definitely taught that growing up. Maybe not word for word, but in substance it was there. That there is nothing in this world that is important as your soul. My mother understood this. You understand this. And you are in the process of teaching that to all these little ones that we see running around. And I'm going to tell you, you are to be commended for that. That is something that will stick with you, something that will stick with your kids for the rest of your life. It is important to take your children to church. I know we brag right now on Erica so much, bringing her children to church. All of you young mothers that are bringing your children to church. It is so important. And I'm not talking about that coming to church, and I want to say this correctly, that the process of coming to church is important, like some zombie doing it, or some hypocrite that just says, we got to go to church. But understanding what is important about coming to church. But if you have days that you are almost that zombie person, bring your kids to church. Why is that so important? I want you to understand that the responsibility is not only yours. You see, the responsibility is all of ours, isn't it? The responsibility is all of ours. When Erica's kids show up, when Caitlin's kids show up, all of Paige's kids show up, all these young kids, it's Chuck and Sally's responsibility. It's me and Laura's responsibility. It's Ralph and Marcia's, Johnny and Margaret's. All of our responsibility to water those kids, isn't it? To make them grow into Christians. So sometimes if we have to show up like that old zombie person, the mother that's beat up and drugged down and on the floor, bring them to church. Because the rest of us may be having a very good day that day. And we can take over. And we can teach those kids what they need that day. That's our responsibility too. And it's a big responsibility. So mothers, once again, you are being commended for your effort and your responsibility for raising God's children. And I said it again, because I want that to really stick in. You are raising God's children. Proverbs 31 and verse 28, and I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and turn over there too. Proverbs 31, very, very popular Mother's Day lesson material, and we're going to mention it, but we're not going to go through it verse by verse. But it states there in verse 28, and we will mention this reading again, so mark your Bibles. Proverbs 31 and verse 28 states that her children will rise up. And that means that when they begin to be on their own, when they get to be of age, that the godly woman, that her children, that they will call her blessed. So bringing our children to church, having them raised in the right manner, To the mothers here, your children will remember that. They will remember that. They may not remember exactly going to the cry room. They may not remember being taken out and spanked a little bit and learning to be quiet. But then again, they may. I certainly do. It is very important that we raise our children in the church. So make your feet, bring them to church. I would love for your feet to be calloused over like my own mother's, simply from pulling those steps out there and bringing your children to church. That is an awesome thing. And I want to commend each and every mother here again because you do that. The second thing that I remember that stuck out about my mother was her hands. Mom's hands. There's a good song that's out that I love a lot. It's kind of old now, about Daddy's hands. And there's stories behind that too. But Mom's hands is what we're talking about this morning. No doubt that her hands started out physically cleaning me. That's where they started out with me. Then they went in advance to cleaning up after me. And then they went on and always did provide for me. They disciplined me. They hugged me. I can remember my mother's hands. Once again, her hands were beautiful hands. She always had her fingernails painted. And they always was what a lady, I guess, would call presentable. They always looked nice. But if you turn those hands over, again, they were calloused. She had calluses on each and every finger knuckle. And it was from handling a hoe, planting a big garden, to take care of her family. She picked cotton. She chopped beans. She was born in 1926, so she was raised during the Great Depression. She was a hard working lady. The Bible speaks often of the work of a mother. Right there, you can read about it in Proverbs 31. How that her hours are endless. How hard it is. How demanding it is. And in Proverbs 31 and 31 lets us know we are to give her respect. Not just because we're told to, but because she deserves it. A mother deserves respect. And let me tell you, if you didn't give my mother respect, if I didn't give my mother respect, she used her hands for something else. And that was necessary too. Now, to me, there were several. But for me, I can't speak for Joyce, but for me, I guess maybe being a boy, she would hit me in the back of the head. That was her favorite thing when I would do something. Matter of fact, when I looked in the mirror, a lot of times the back of my hair was standing up. I had a lot of trouble and still have trouble to this day getting my hair to lay down in the back. And I think that's from her hitting me in the back of the head. And I tell you what, when I messed up, she could draw faster than Matt Dillon on Gunsmoke. I mean, you said something that disrespected her and it was pretty quick. Now, I'm not talking about abuse. I'm talking about a love hit that took. Now, on occasion, when it was bad enough, my right ear would be ringing because my left ear just got hit that hard. So she could lay it on you pretty good too. Now, this involves the mother's hands. When you look at your mother's hands, the Bible says we are to be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. I think if my mother could change something in that or add something to it in the Bible, she would have said swift to discipline. Because she was a disciplinarian. She would swiftly discipline you. I thank my mother every day now for the swats, for the words that I got, for the looks that I got. I've heard lots of you in here talk about a look from your mother that could stop you in the tracks. And a lot of times you got that look because you were in a public situation. Now, that really didn't bother my mother too much. But a lot of times you got that look because you were in a public situation and it was like, don't do that again. You're not going to embarrass me in front of these people. So you got that look. And if you didn't stop instantly, you knew what you were going to get when you got home. And like I said, here all these years later, I still respect her for every swat she ever gave me. Now, as strongly as my siblings would say that I was spoiled and never got the things they got, they would be wrong. I feared my mother and felt her wrath. And yes, I was spoiled. I was spoiled. I was the baby and I was spoiled. But I definitely felt my mother's wrath. The rod of correction that is spoke about in Proverbs 13 and verse 24 that says to spare the rod, you will spoil the child. Well, let me tell you, around the Griffin house, hanging on the wall in the Griffin house, that rod didn't have any dust on it. It was quick to come out. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you look at that verse there in Proverbs, it means she loved me. Just as God disciplines us out of love, as the proverb says, she didn't hate me. The reason why she disciplined me, she showed me love by correcting me, teaching me in a way that I wouldn't forget it. And I think that is what we are taught to do today. As I said, I'm thankful for every bit of the discipline that I got. I'll tell you one thing I am glad of, though. That she wasn't flexible enough to get that sandpaper foot up on the back of my head. That was the only thing I think that spared any brain injury. But in her final years, one more thing I want to mention that sticks out in my mind is my mother turned blue-haired. I see people laughing. You've all seen these women. It's not quite as prevalent today as it was a few years ago. But Mom started dyeing her hair blue. What in the world? She dyed her hair blue. And that leaves an impression on me to this day. You might say, well, why does that leave an impression on me? And I would say, well, did you ever see it? But that's not what I'm talking about. Seriously, from a study of the phenomenon of older blue-haired women, did you know there's a study of that? There is. There's a study of older blue-haired women. There are as many opinions of why older women dye their hair blue than there is older blue-haired women. It was a thing. And you still see it today. But one opinion of all the opinions, and that's all they were, of why women do this sticks out to me, and I think this person got it right. I think they got it right. You see, our mothers have dedicated their entire lives to their husbands, their children, and the work involved in raising and caring for a family. God's job for them, and they focused on that. Research shows that the blue hair was their outburst of look at me. And to me, that made sense. Look at me. I am not just Scott's mother. I am not just Grady's wife. I am not just a keeper of the home. I am an individual. I am an individual with feelings, ideas, emotions, desires, personal goals, expectations, and dreams. But wait just a minute. I sacrificed all of them for my family's feelings, ideas, emotions, desires, personal goals, expectations, and dreams. And that's what my mother did. Yes, she was an individual. She was an individual person, but I think she sacrificed so many of the things that she thought about for herself day to day so that we could have the things that we wanted to have. And you know what she said then when she got older? How do you like my blue hair? That's what she said. It was all the things I feel like, and this person hit it the nail on the head, that she had in mind for herself, all rolled into one. It was almost like that old Helen Reddy song that the title is, I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. I know some of you remember that song. And you realize blue is a godly color. Just think about God. It says on the seventh day, he rested and he looked at all that he created. What was on the very top? The blue sky. The blue sky. Blue is an important color in the Bible, and I tell you what, it's such an important color that one of these days we're going to have a lesson on that. But one of the things I want you to realize too is anytime that we think and we turn our eyes toward heaven, what do we see? Blue. We see blue. Now, I just mentioned that old Helen Reddy song, I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar, and I want to mention just a few words from this song. They're not really in lyric order, but this is what the song says. I am woman, hear me roar, in numbers too big to ignore. Everybody knows that one. You know, that's how it starts out. But another lyric is, cause I've been down there on the floor. Mothers a lot of times find themselves on the floor, beat down past their socks. They can't get any lower. And it goes on and it says, oh yes, I'm wise. But it's wisdom from all the pain. That's how the mothers got their wisdom, is all the pain that they've gone through. It says, yes, I've paid the price, but look how much I've gained. You know, on a day like today, we all get our picture taken together with our mothers. And that's simply just pictures of how much our mothers have gained. That's the way we look at it. The song goes on to say, I am strong, I am invincible. But if I have to, I can do anything. And we put our mothers to the test on that one so many times. It goes on to say, you can bend me, but you will not break me. I will achieve my final goal. And I know my mother's final goal was to raise her family. And she did that. And this brings me back to what the little first page that I opened the lesson with. Because it was kind of depressing. Thinking about how we decline as we get older and then we die. Well, you know what? God had a different plan for the woman. God had a different plan for the woman. Man looks at life as gloom and doom in our last years, but in God's eyes, the path of a woman's life, they get stronger as they get older. As a matter of fact, the woman is taught to teach in her older years. Teach who? Teach the younger women how to be that strong. So God looked at the woman, and you're getting older, you don't see as good, you don't hear as good, you don't get around as good, and he said, that's okay, you teach. You teach. Your young women have to know this. They have to know this. You know, in Proverbs there, chapter 31, and it kind of starts out if you read that, and I would encourage you to read that whole chapter on your own. It starts out talking about the lady, the single person, the wife, and then it goes on into motherhood. In verse 25, it says she is clothed with strength and dignity. And I'm going to finish that here in a minute. In Proverbs 31, 10 to 12, it says, who could find a wife? In other words, just a lady. Who could find a wife like this one? She is a woman of strength and mighty valor. So when does that tell that we start that? Before we're ever married, a woman is to be. Starting to gain those things. She is full of wealth and wisdom. The price paid for her is greater than many jewels, and her husband has entrusted her with his heart, and she brings him the rich spoils of his victories. All throughout her life, she brings him what is good and not evil. That is a virtuous woman. And in verse 31, we started this while ago, this saying, but I want to finish it. It says, her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and praises her. Many women, now look at this. Because this is talking about the mother. This is when the lady has graduated into motherhood. Many women have done excellently. But you have surpassed them all. When you become a mother and you get into that older age, you have surpassed all of them. You have reached your goal. And that's why I feel that my mother did reach her goal. And so why again did I mention the very beginning that life is gloom and doom and then you die? Because look what God said for the woman. Again, this is in Proverbs 31 verse 25. Says she, and I read it, part of it, she is clothed with strength and dignity. The NIV version writes the rest of it like this. She can laugh at the days to come. And they examined that and tried to explain what that meant in the old writing. And it means that no matter what lays ahead of her, even old age, she can laugh in the face of it. Because she's strong. She's been down there on the floor. She's prepared. And she can handle it. We all love to look at our mothers. And I want to end the lesson with this. In Isaiah 66, in verse 13, you've got God speaking here. And God said when He comforts, He said, when I comfort my children, talking about all of us, the way that He wants to do it is the way that a mother comforts her children. Now think about that. This is God speaking. And when He says, I want to comfort my children, He couldn't think of any better way than to stress it than to say, like the comfort that a mother can give her child. I don't know about you, but that is a big compliment. When that is the only way that God knows how to stress His love for us is through the eyes of a mother. And I want each and every one of you to know here that I think you're doing a wonderful job. You're here this morning. You got your kids here. You got your grandkids here. They're sitting on your lap. You're doing your job. And even though that you may feel at times your goals have been put somewhere else, you're doing your goal. And you will realize it one of these days. And my only request to you is to bring back that blue hair. When you get to that age, and Margaret, you're almost there. Bring back that blue hair. The lesson is yours this morning. I hope you enjoyed it. If there's anything that we can do for you, we can aid you in any way of teaching you further how to become a Christian, let us know. We're anxious to help you. If there's anything that we can do for you at all, let us know as we stand and as we sing.